Hello and welcome to the Garden of the Black Roses. This is the next chapter of Magic of Moonlight. Just as a pre-warning, this chapter does have some sexual content. I would suggest not listening if you're not up to listening to sexual content. It's not overly explicit. Actually, let me double check to make sure it isn't overly explicit. I might actually, when I get to it, just read what they say, not the actual description around it, but I will mention it before I get to it. Okay, so, Chapter 1, Intervening Years. It has been weeks since he last saw Ember, and Sebastian was starting to feel a bit antsy. Caius had been avoiding his questions about where she was as well. Even her friends had rarely seen her outside the pack house, but unlike him, they appeared to know what was going on and didn't question her absence as much. Caius? Sebastian asked for what felt like the millionth time. Seriously? Please just tell me. Why are you hiding it? Caius let out an exasperated sigh. Because she asked me to, okay? Asked you to? He was confused. Why would Ember specifically ask for whatever was going on to be hidden from him? Did she say why? She's afraid you'll judge her. Caius immediately threw his hands up to try and hold him from being snapped at. She's in a vulnerable state at the moment and is afraid. What could I possibly judge her for? Sebastian replied, even more confused. Or for that matter, why would I? Come home with me this evening and see if you can get her to talk about it. Caius replied with a sigh. I don't know what happened, but all I know is that she's in a dark place. Only her friends seem to know exactly what happened, and they won't tell me. That evening, Sebastian sat in the lounge waiting on Caius to come downstairs. He could tell something was off by the smell within the pack house. The usual scents were there, but something smelled wrong. She won't come downstairs, Caius said with a sigh before flopping onto the lounge. She's still hiding in the same spot I left her this morning. I don't think she's moved from there all day. Hiding? Sebastian got up with a slight smile. Let me try. Caius waved his hands toward the stairs. Be my guest. She knows you're here. She refused to talk to me as soon as I mentioned it. Sebastian gave him a small nod before making his way upstairs. The smell that was wrong becoming clear. Ember's apple cinnamon scent was tainted. It was mingled with other scents he knew were not hers. He growled lightly before composing himself to knock on her door. Ember? He was only greeted with silence from the other side. Ember, I know you're in there. I can smell you. And I think I might know what happened to you. He pushed open the door and stepped into the room. His senses drew him to her bed. With mildly amused smile, he sat down before laying down completely to look underneath. Two bright green eyes stared back at him from the darkness. He gazed at them, taking in how bloodshot they were. He laid there in silence, just watching her, waiting for her to speak. Why are you here? She asked, finally. Her voice sounded gravelly, like as if it had been damaged from screaming or crying. I told Caius I didn't want to see you. She shut her eyes, causing him to lose sight of where she was in the darkness. I'm broken. You don't need me near you. He let out a loud growl, causing her to let out a shriek and then a whimper in response. I don't need you. I always need you. I need my little bundle of silliness around, but right now it seems you need me more. What happened? Ember was silent. Her mind was reeling. His little bundle of silliness? She wondered what he meant by that. Images of him giggling and laughing at her antics came to mind. Oh. She looked back at him curiously. Can I trust him? The motherly voice that urged her to read the book about the Werewolf King so long ago once again urged her to trust him. Hesitantly, she began to speak. I can't tell you. She began to carefully move out from under the bed. But I can show you. Show? He asked, sitting up. He watched as she came closer to him. A part of him told him not to move and let her take her time and make decisions on how and where to touch him. Nodding, she came closer. She placed her hands onto his knees before resting her forehead on his. I learned how to do this. I can show you. Scenes flashed through his mind. Her being dragged from the school hallway, hands touching her everywhere, and fear. Lots and lots of fear. He growled angrily. He could see the faces of the wolves who violated her so aggressively and repeatedly. He would deal with all of them later. Ember moved away. He reached out and pulled her close again. Broken on the outside, he whispered in her ear, but don't let them break you inside as well. The floodgates opened. Ember cried, her hands gripping his clothes tightly. She couldn't take the pain anymore. She needed him near her, slowly and slowly. Her crying eased to hiccups and then silence. Sebastian eased her into a more comfortable position in his lap. Gently he brushed her hair from her face before mind-linking Caius. She showed me. She showed you? Caius sounded confused. Footsteps from downstairs sounded like they were moving upstairs. How? I'm not sure, but she showed me. I'll send you what she showed me, but stay down there before coming up. She's asleep and will freak if you growl. He waited for the footsteps to go back downstairs before he showed him what he saw. Caius's growl was loud by the end, but not loud enough for Ember to hear from the distance. Those bastards! I'm going to have to get the alphas in on this. Can I leave my sister with you? If she's asleep, I gather you managed to get her out from under the bed? Yeah, Sebastian sighed lightly. I've never seen her so afraid or uncertain of trusting me before, but after seeing that, I can see why. Same here. Caius let off another loud and angry growl before setting about getting justice for his sister. Sebastian found himself stuck in Ember's room. She was rarely awake, and when she was, she would hold on to him and cry. As soon as he made to leave the room, she would dive under the bed again and would take a lot of coaxing to come back out. He also found that he was often left alone with her in the pack house, while everyone had gone to school or other various duties. Ember? He asked quietly during one such day. Is there something still bothering you? He had shown her the execution of her attackers, and he knew that had brought her some comfort that they no longer could harm her. I can still feel them touching me, she whispered quietly. Their hands, other body parts, touching me, inside me. She shivered and began to cry lightly. He bit his lip. What if we replaced that with a good feeling? He wasn't sure if this was a good move, but he didn't want to see her continue to be sad. Okay, from this point on, I'm going to just read what they say. And maybe little bits and pieces of, like, who's talking. Okay. Good feeling? Ember asked quietly. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing to focus on his hand. Smiling, he got a bit bolder. He turned her around so her back was flush against his chest. She let out a yelp of surprise before letting out a little pleasured moan. She turned bright red. We can change that feeling of them touching and grabbing you to of me touching you in a way that you enjoy, he whispered. I haven't done this before, so tell me if I hurt you. My parents might get mad, Ember whispered in reply. No one will be home until later tonight, he replied. So if we do this now, my scent will have dissipated by then. My scent on you will have dissipated by then. Ember looked up at him and nodded. He leaned down and kissed her before replying, Let's start with the worst ones first. She stared at him in surprise. The pauses are where I'm skipping words, by the way. They gagged you by forcing themselves into you. What I want you to do is take me into you at your own pace. There is a lot that I'm skipping here. It's, yeah. You don't get much pleasure from that one, he said as he pulled himself out of her mouth. He leaned down to kiss her. But the next one you'll get a lot more pleasure, I promise you. Then why did they do that? She asked him. For a wolf, it feels good, he replied, reaching down once again. Some wolves say it feels like being inside them. It's the next best thing. Oh. And sex is what wolves want? Wolves are sexual beings, he replied. Most wolves wait for their true mate to have sex, but some, as you now know, just take what they want. Ready? Feeling good? He asked. Feels really good, she breathed. She wrapped her arms around him and pulled him closer. I can't feel them anymore. All I can feel is you. Good, baby. Very good. He leaned down and nibbled her neck. Prepare yourself. I'm going faster. And this is why we need to do this now, he whispered in her ear. My scent is inside you now. Imagine my fighters removing traces of those bastards who violated you. Once they are done, my scent will dissipate, leaving yours alone. fighting inside me," she whispered before passing out into a deep sleep. He was still uncertain if this was the right thing to do, but as long as Ember was happier, it was all worth it in the end. So now it's a scene jump. So that whole scene that I just read was a bit naughty. The next day, Sebastian came down with Ember in tow. He was happy she had improved enough to not only stop crying, but also leave her room. Kaya seemed surprised at the change from the previous day. "Sorry for leaving my sister in your care," he said, giving Ember a pat on the head. "But she was responding to you so well that I thought it was better that someone who was able to break that wall she had up. Was better that someone who was able to break the wall that she had up would be better able to help her through." Ember gave him a kiss on the cheek. "Sebastian helped a lot. Thanks, bro." She skipped off to the kitchen, leaving the two wolves confused at the interaction. "Should I be worried?" Caius asked with a sidelong glance. "No more than usual when it comes to your sister," Sebastian replied with a grin. "She'll be fine. If it's something to worry about, she'll come and tell you." Caius watched him suspiciously before shaking his head. "Whatever you did to get her out of that depression she was in did the trick. I do owe you one for that." "No need." He smiled as Ember returned, happily eating a bowl of ice cream with strawberries and a dusting of chocolate powder. How are the plans for your 16th going?" "Nowhere," Caius replied gloomily. "Couldn't concentrate on it." "If you don't do it, you'll be stuck with whatever Mum plans for you," Ember said, licking her spoon before dumping it into the bowl for another spoonful. She glanced sidelong at Sebastian. "Mum's determined to plan mine," he said with a sigh. "She wants high-ranked wolves. All there. Since we're the strongest pack in this area, she wants to make sure that if my mate is also a high-ranked wolf, that I'll find her straight away." "Assuming she's of age," Ember murmured softly. Caius, being the only one who heard her, raised an eyebrow at that comment. She shook her head at him and kept a secret smile all to herself. "Griffin, I look forward to meeting you." His 16th came all too soon for Sebastian. She-wolves from all over the 10 ancient packs were invited to his birthday, in the hopes that one would be his mate. He had been growing frustrated at them throwing themselves at him. Only one she-wolf in particular didn't join in the festivities. "Reading again?" he asked the young red-headed she-wolf. She nodded, not looking up from her book. "What is it on this time?" "Mates," she replied. His heart skipped a beat. "About the benefits of a true mate versus a chosen mate." His world came crashing down again. Of course she wouldn't be hinting that she is his mate. She wouldn't know yet, as she wasn't of age to receive her wolf or have her first shift. "Is Lunarius making toffee apples?" Sebastian blinked in surprise at the change of topic. "Not that I know of. Why do you ask?" She sniffed the air before going back to reading her book. "The scent of toffee apple is strong tonight, that's all." He raised an eyebrow. He wasn't going to admit it out loud, but her apple cinnamon scent was also quite strong tonight. It overpowered both the natural and synthetic scents of all the she-wolves present. Sighing, he dropped down next to her and rested his head on her shoulder. "No luck tonight," he said softly. He felt her stiffen at this, but was too tired to ponder on what it could mean. "All these she-wolves and not one is my mate." "Maybe your mate isn't of age yet," she replied, relaxing a little. Her hands rested on the book, marking the last word she had read. Or she isn't a high-ranking wolf. He was silent for a bit, his eyes heavy with tiredness, before saying softly, "I wish you were my mate." Ember waited. She watched as his breathing slowed down and his eyes shut. She turned her head slightly to place a kiss on what she could reach before whispering back, "Me too." She closed her eyes. "Caius?" "What's up, sis?" His voice sounded jovial and easily amused. Sebastian fell asleep on my shoulder again. There was a strange pause before Caius laughed, albeit nervously. I wondered where he had gotten to. Had one of your deep and meaningful conversations with him? Just come get him. Her tone was clear that she wasn't going to tell him anything that they spoke about. "Sure thing, on my way, sis." Ember sat watching the night sky with Sebastian fast asleep on her shoulder. "So you've taken to hoarding him for yourself, have you?" She looked around and spotted the Shadowrunner's beater's daughter, Chelsea. "He should be in the party, not out here with you, Lona." "I didn't ask him to come out," Ember replied quietly. "He came out and fell asleep on his own accord. I've mind-linked my brother to come and take him back inside." "Smart move," Chelsea replied, seeing Caius come around the corner. "It's good to know you know where you stand," she hissed quickly before giving Caius a wave. "Was just keeping Ember company while you came to get Sebastian." Caius glanced at Chelsea suspiciously. "Don't start anything," Ember warned him via mind link. "She'll get me later when you and Sebastian aren't around if you do." I know. I'll try and get her to follow me inside." He bent down and picked Sebastian up before looking again at Chelsea. "Can you give me a hand with the doors? I can't help them while carrying this sleeping beauty." They both laughed. "Of course, Caius." Chelsea smirked and waved at Ember. "Later, Ember." Ember waved and watched the three leave. She was glad Chelsea left with her brother. She could slip away to another hidden location so she wouldn't be disturbed if Chelsea decided to try and find her and start something. The things I do so I won't get hurt again. And that's it for that chapter. I'm going to have to work out a better way to read my naughty scenes. Because, yeah, that was a little disjointed and odd. But yeah, I will think of a way. Maybe. We'll see. For now, it's going to be like that, where I'll just read bits and pieces and pause in between, and then let you know when it jumps to a new scene. That's it. As always, let your imagination run wild. Bye for now.